What if I told you that the man who orchestrated one of history's most infamous surprise attacks actually never wanted the war to happen in the first place? Picture this. A Japanese admiral who loved American culture, had friends in the U.S. Navy, and repeatedly warned his own government that fighting America would be suicide. Yet this same man would go on to plan Pearl Harbor. Sounds impossible, right? Well, buckle up, because the story of Admiral Yamamoto is about to blow your mind. December 7th, 1941. It's a peaceful Sunday morning in Hawaii when suddenly the sky erupts with the sound of warplanes. Japanese bombers are descending like a deadly storm on Pearl Harbor, catching the American fleet completely off guard. Ships are sinking, explosions are echoing across the water, and in just a few hours, America is thrust into World War II. But here's the crazy part. 4,000 miles away, sitting on his flagship in a Japanese bay, the architect of this devastating attack is waiting nervously for news, knowing full well that this moment could either make or destroy his entire nation. His name was Isoroku Yamamoto, and trust me, his story is nothing like what you'd expect from a wartime enemy. Let's rewind to 1884. Our future admiral wasn't even born a Yamamoto. He started life as Isoroku Takano in a small Japanese town called Nagaoka. Now get this, his name literally means 56 because that's how old his father was when he was born. Talk about a unique naming system. But here's where it gets interesting. His father came from a samurai family, and back then being a samurai in Japan wasn't exactly a ticket to success anymore. You see, Japan was going through massive changes. For centuries, the country had been completely isolated from the outside world. No foreign trade, no outside influence, nothing. Then suddenly, American warships showed up in the 1850s and basically forced Japan to open up. Imagine living in complete isolation for hundreds of years, and then boom. The entire world comes knocking at your door. This created a huge split in Japanese society. Some people wanted to embrace Western technology and modernize everything, while others wanted to keep the old ways alive. Young Isoroku grew up right in the middle of this cultural earthquake, and it shaped everything about his future. Now here's something that'll surprise you. This future architect of Pearl Harbor was actually taught English by a Christian missionary. He read the Bible and was exposed to Western ideas from a very young age. Most Japanese kids at the time were suspicious of anything foreign, but not Isoroku. He was curious, open-minded, and fascinated by the outside world. When he was just 17, something incredible happened. He scored second place in the entire country on the entrance exams for Japan's Naval Academy. Think about that pressure. Thousands of kids competing for just a handful of spots, and this small-town boy from a struggling samurai family nearly topped them all. At the academy, while other cadets were wary of him reading his Bible, Isoroku was already showing signs of the strategic mind that would later shock the world. He specialized in naval gunnery and was well respected, but more importantly, he was learning to think differently from everyone around him. And then came his first taste of real combat. In 1905, Japan went to war with Russia, and 21-year-old Isoroku found himself in the middle of one of the most decisive naval battles in history. The Battle of Tsushima was basically Japan's coming out party as a world power. They absolutely demolished the Russian fleet, but for young Isoroku, victory came at a personal cost. During the battle, an explosion tore off 2 of his fingers and left him with a permanent leg wound. But here's what's remarkable. Instead of being discouraged, this injury only motivated him more. He received a personal letter of commendation from Admiral Togo himself, the hero of the battle. This moment planted a seed in Yamamoto's mind about the power of surprise attacks, something that would become his signature strategy decades later. Fast forward to the 1910s, and our wounded veteran is climbing the naval ranks, But what's really fascinating is what happened when he got sent to America for the first time. Remember, this is supposed to be Japan's future enemy, right? Well, Yamamoto fell in love with the place. He studied at Harvard, traveled to Chicago and Detroit, and was absolutely amazed by American industrial power. He wasn't just visiting as a tourist either. He was there on official business, studying petroleum resources because Japan was running dangerously low on oil. But in his spare time, he was playing poker and bridge with American naval officers, learning English and developing genuine friendships with the people he was supposed to be gathering intelligence on. This is where the story gets really complex. Yamamoto could see America's incredible potential. Their factories, their resources, their innovative spirit. It both impressed and terrified him. He realized that if Japan ever went to war with America, it would be like a lightweight boxer challenging a heavyweight champion. But while Yamamoto was becoming more internationally minded, Japan itself was heading in the opposite direction. The country was getting more aggressive, more nationalistic, and more convinced that it could take on the world. During the 1930s, Japan invaded Manchuria, withdrew from the League of Nations, and started making enemies left and right. And Yamamoto? He was one of the few high-ranking officials speaking out against it. He repeatedly warned his colleagues that war with America would be catastrophic. He knew the numbers, he'd seen their industrial capacity firsthand, and he understood what most Japanese leaders refused to accept, that Japan simply couldn't win a long war against the United States. But here's where duty and personal beliefs collided in the most dramatic way possible. Despite his opposition to war, despite his friendships with Americans, despite his certainty that Japan would lose, Yamamoto was a naval officer. When his country decided on war, his job was to figure out how to win it. And that's when his brilliant but conflicted mind came up with the Pearl Harbor plan. Yamamoto's logic was actually pretty sound, even if it was based on a terrible premise. He figured that if Japan absolutely had to fight America, the only chance was to strike so hard and so fast that the Americans would be willing to negotiate peace before their industrial machine could gear up for total war. He studied how Admiral Togo had surprised the Russians at Port Arthur in 1904, and he thought, what if we could do that again, but bigger? The American Pacific Fleet had recently moved from California to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, putting their ships much closer to Japan. To Yamamoto, this looked like an opportunity. So he spent months planning the most audacious naval operation in history. 6 aircraft carriers, hundreds of planes, a fleet approaching from the north in complete radio silence. It was brilliant, terrifying, and completely unprecedented. But even as he planned this attack, Yamamoto was telling anyone who would listen that Japan needed to end the war quickly. He famously said that his fleet could run wild in the Pacific for maybe 6 months to a year. But after that, American production would overwhelm them completely. Think about that. The man planning Pearl Harbor was simultaneously predicting Japan's eventual defeat. It's like a chess master making a brilliant opening move while knowing he's going to lose the game. December 7th, 1941 arrives, and everything goes almost exactly according to plan. The attack is a tactical masterpiece. American battleships are sunk or damaged, hundreds of planes are destroyed, and the Pacific Fleet is crippled. Japan achieves complete surprise and inflicts devastating damage. But Yamamoto wasn't celebrating. He was furious, actually, because Admiral Nagumo, who led the actual attack, pulled back too early. The shore facilities were still intact, the oil storage tanks weren't destroyed, and most critically, America's aircraft carriers weren't in port that day. They escaped completely. Yamamoto knew immediately that this was a problem. He'd wounded the giant, but he hadn't killed it. And now that giant was going to be very, very angry. His prediction proved correct faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, Japan lost 4 of its most valuable aircraft carriers at the Battle of Midway. It was a disaster that Yamamoto saw coming but couldn't prevent. The tide of war had already turned, and it was all downhill from there. For the next year and a half, Yamamoto fought a losing battle. He won some tactical victories, but strategically Japan was doomed. American industrial production was ramping up exactly as he had predicted. New ships, new planes, new weapons were pouring out of American factories faster than Japan could ever hope to match. The man who had spent the 1930s warning against war with America was now watching his worst fears come true in real time. Every battle, every loss, every strategic defeat was proof that he had been right all along. And then, on April 18, 1943, Yamamoto's war came to an end. American intelligence intercepted his travel plans and sent fighter planes to shoot down his aircraft. The mastermind of Pearl Harbor died in the jungles of the Solomon Islands, never living to see the complete destruction of Japan that he had always predicted would result from fighting America. So here's the question that makes Yamamoto's story so fascinating. Was he a brilliant military strategist or a tragic figure caught in an impossible situation? He planned one of the most successful surprise attacks in military history. But he did it while believing his country was doomed to lose. He served his emperor faithfully while privately opposing everything his government was doing. In many ways, Yamamoto represents the complexity of war itself. He wasn't some cartoon villain plotting world domination. He was a thoughtful, internationally minded officer who understood his enemy better than most of his colleagues understood their own chances of victory. He tried to prevent a war he knew Japan couldn't win, and when prevention failed, he tried to win it anyway. The really tragic part? If Japanese leaders had listened to Yamamoto's warnings in the 1930s instead of just his battle plans in 1941, millions of lives might have been saved, and history might have taken a completely different path. What do you think? Was Yamamoto a military genius trapped by duty, or could he have done more to prevent the disaster he saw coming? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story surprised you as much as it surprised me when I first learned about it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories from history that'll change how you see the world.